The snow began falling just before dusk, slow and silent, as if the sky itself was trying not to disturb anyone. I remember standing by the window, watching the streetlights blur into soft halos of gold, feeling something unfamiliar settle inside my chest. It was Christmas Eve, and for the first time in my life, I knew I would not be sleeping that night. Not because of excitement, because I no longer needed to. The house I was staying in was old, though not in a dramatic way. No creaking staircases or howling winds, just a quiet, lived-in stillness, the kind that absorbs sound rather than echoes it. Evergreen garlands hung loosely along the banister, their scent faint but comforting. Somewhere in the distance, a radio played a carol so softly it felt more like a memory than music. I moved through the rooms without making a sound. I had already learned how easily silence bent around me now. My footsteps no longer announced themselves. My breath no longer fogged the air. It had been 3 weeks since everything changed. 3 weeks since I woke up on the forest floor with snow melting against my skin and no memory of how I had gotten there. 3 weeks since hunger had become something sharper, stranger, more specific. 3 weeks since mirrors had started feeling like windows rather than reflections. And now it was Christmas. I paused near the fireplace. The stockings were already hung, carefully spaced, each one embroidered with a name. Mine was there too. Someone had stitched it in red thread, neat and deliberate, as if nothing about me had changed at all. I touched the fabric lightly. It felt warmer than it should have. That was another thing I was learning, how differently the world felt. Textures carried weight now. Sounds lingered longer. Even time itself seemed to move with a kind of patience I had never noticed before, as if it knew I was no longer in a hurry. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, the clock ticked. I realized then that this would be my first Christmas spent fully awake, not half dreaming, not dulled by exhaustion or routine, awake in a way that felt deep and permanent, awake in a way that made memories surface uninvited. I wondered briefly if Christmas could tell the difference, if it knew what I was. The thought didn't frighten me. That surprised me most of all. Instead, I felt something closer to curiosity, a quiet question forming beneath the calm. What does a night of peace mean to someone who no longer belongs to the day? I stepped closer to the window and looked out at the empty street, the snow, the soft glow of decorated houses. Somewhere families were gathering. Somewhere children were being told stories meant to make them feel safe. And here I was, standing perfectly still, heart steady but different, realizing that this night, this gentle, familiar night, would not unfold the way I had always known it. This Christmas would ask something of me. I just didn't yet know what. The second night arrived quietly, wrapped in the soft hush of falling snow. I began to notice how differently time moved now. Minutes stretched, not painfully, but gently, like breath held just a moment longer than usual. The clock in the living room chimed once, then seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether it should keep counting hours for someone like me. The house felt warmer at night. Not physically. If anything, the air was cooler, but there was a presence in the rooms, a low, constant awareness, as though the walls themselves were listening. I moved through the hallway without turning on the lights, guided by instinct more than sight. Shadows no longer felt empty. They felt occupied.
I stood by the window again. The street lamp outside flickered, casting pale gold across the snow. Every sound carried farther now. The distant hum of a car engine, the faint creak of a tree branch, the soft scrape of wind against glass. Each noise arrived with clarity, then faded, leaving behind a gentle echo inside my mind. I wondered if this was how it had always been, and I had simply been deaf to it before. On the kitchen table sat a small box I didn't remember placing there. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with a thin red string. No tag, no name. I stared at it for a long time, feeling a strange pull toward it, mixed with a quiet reluctance. Eventually, I loosened the string.
Inside was a single ornament, a glass sphere, dark crimson, almost black at its center. When I lifted it, the surface felt cool, but not cold. My reflection curved along its glass, unfamiliar yet unmistakably mine. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw my eyes glow faintly from within the ornament, but the image slipped away before I could be sure. I hung it on the tree. The lights around it dimmed slightly, as if giving the ornament space. The room seemed to breathe out. I felt something settle inside me, not hunger, not fear, but recognition, like remembering a song you didn't know you'd forgotten. Later, as midnight approached, I felt the pull again, not toward the window this time, but inward, toward silence. I sat on the floor beside the tree, letting the soft glow wash over me. Christmas music drifted faintly from a neighbor's radio, slowed and softened by the snow. Each note stretched into something almost dreamlike. That was when I realized something else had changed. I wasn't waiting for morning anymore. The snow began to fall more steadily after midnight. Soft flakes drifting past the windows like slow-moving thoughts. I watched them from the armchair near the fireplace, my hands wrapped around a porcelain mug that no longer warmed me, though I still enjoyed the habit of holding it. The house was quiet in a way that felt intentional, as if it were holding its breath. Earlier that evening, I had tried to eat with the others. They had gathered around the dining table, candles glowing, laughter rising and falling, like music I almost remembered how to follow. Plates were passed, glasses clinked, and someone insisted I try the roast before it cooled. I smiled, nodded, lifted my fork, and mimicked the motions I'd spent a lifetime mastering. Chew, swallow, smile again. No one noticed that I didn't actually eat, or maybe they did and chose not to say anything. That uncertainty followed me now, lingering like the scent of pine and cinnamon still hanging in the air. Christmas had always been about togetherness, about warmth shared in simple ways. Tonight, it felt more like a performance I was afraid of forgetting my lines in. When the others finally went to bed, the house shifted. Floorboards relaxed. The ticking clock in the hallway grew louder. I stood and walked slowly from room to room, touching familiar things as if to reassure myself they were still real. The edge of the piano, the worn banister, a framed photograph from years ago when my reflection still made sense.
In the mirror above the hallway table, I avoided looking directly at myself. Instead, I focused on what was behind me, the softly lit tree in the living room, ornaments catching the light like tiny frozen stars. For a moment, I could almost pretend nothing had changed. But the hunger was there. Not sharp, not violent, just a quiet pull, like gravity. It reminded itself, gently, patiently, as if it knew time was on its side. I pressed my palm against my chest, breathing in a way I no longer needed to, and wondered how many Christmases it would take before this feeling became normal.
Outside, a car passed in the distance, tires hissing over snow. Somewhere, someone laughed. Somewhere else, a door closed. The world kept moving forward, unaware that I was standing still, caught between what I had been and what I was becoming. I returned to the armchair and sat, listening to the fire crackle. Its warmth was only a memory, but the sound comforted me anyway. I told myself that tonight was about restraint, about learning, about proving, to myself more than anyone, that I could exist like this without breaking something fragile.
As the snow thickened and the night deepened, I closed my eyes and let the quiet settle around me. This was my first Christmas as a vampire, and I was beginning to understand that the hardest part wasn't the darkness. It was learning how to stay.
The snow began to fall just after dusk, soft and soundless, as if the world itself was holding its breath. From the window of the old house, I watched the village lights glow one by one, warm squares of gold against the deepening blue of night. Somewhere below, a bell rang, distant and slow, marking the hour. Christmas Eve had arrived. I did not feel the cold anymore, but I remembered it. That memory lingered in my body like an echo, how the air once stung my lungs, how my fingers would ache until they went numb. Now I stood close to the glass only to feel something familiar, something human, even though the chill could no longer touch me.
The house had once belonged to a family who celebrated Christmas loudly. I could still sense it in the walls. Laughter, clinking glasses, the muffled chaos of too many people in one room. When I first arrived here weeks ago, those impressions felt overwhelming, almost painful. Tonight, they felt gentle, like a story someone had told long ago. I moved through the hallway, my footsteps barely making a sound. The mirrors along the wall reflected nothing but shadows and candlelight. I had stopped checking them days ago. Instead, I focused on the small rituals I had created for myself, lighting candles at sunset, straightening objects that did not need to be straightened, pretending these actions meant something more than passing time.
In the parlor, a Christmas tree stood near the fireplace. I had found it already there when I arrived, dried needles scattered across the floor like tiny bones. I had considered throwing it out, but something held me back, so I decorated it instead, slowly, with ornaments I found tucked away in dusty boxes. glass spheres, hand-carved figures, faded ribbons. Each one carried a faint emotional residue, like a fingerprint of joy. As I adjusted a crooked ornament, a memory surfaced without warning. A different Christmas, a smaller tree, the smell of oranges and pine, someone laughing behind me as I tried to hang the star too high. The memory did not hurt. It drifted through me, warm and brief, then faded like breath on glass.
Outside, the wind stirred, whispering through the trees. For a moment, I thought I heard singing, soft, distant, almost imagined. I closed my eyes and listened. There it was again, not quite music, not quite silence, just enough to make me wonder if the night itself was remembering something. I sat by the fireplace, though I did not light it. Firelight would have been unnecessary. Instead, I let the candles do their quiet work, filling the room with slow-moving shadows. Time stretched, folded in on itself. Minutes felt like hours, hours like moments.
This was my first Christmas like this. Watching instead of participating, remembering instead of living. And yet, as the snow continued to fall and the village settled into sleep, I felt something unexpected rise within me. Not hunger, not fear, a calm curiosity, as if this night, more than any other, was waiting to reveal what I was becoming and what I might still be able to keep.
Snow had fallen again by the time Christmas Eve arrived, quiet and patient, softening the edges of the town. From the attic window, I watched lanterns glow along the streets below, their light trembling through the cold like something alive. People moved slowly, bundled in coats, carrying wrapped boxes and shared laughter. It looked peaceful. It always did, from a distance. I had learned that distance was my ally. Inside the house, the rooms smelled faintly of pine and old wood. The previous owners had left behind traces of their lives, ornaments packed in yellowed boxes, a cracked music box on the mantel, a wreath pressed flat inside a closet door. I had unpacked none of it until that night. Something about Christmas made the past feel closer, as if memory itself drifted through walls.
I took one ornament from the box. It was glass, painted with a small village scene, snow on rooftops, windows glowing warmly. I turned it slowly between my fingers, careful not to break it. My reflection shimmered on its surface, distorted, almost human. Almost. I had not fed since the night before. The hunger was there, but quiet, like a distant ache rather than a scream. I was learning restraint, learning to listen to my body the way one listens to a story, unfolding slowly, patiently. Hunger passed. It always did, if I let it.
Outside, a church bell rang once, then again. Midnight would come soon. I lit a single candle on the table and sat beside it, letting the flame hold my attention. Fire was dangerous but beautiful. It reminded me that warmth still existed, even if I could not truly feel it the way others did. I could remember it, though. Memory was enough. The knock came just after the bell rang 12 times. It was soft, polite, almost hesitant. I froze, listening. No footsteps followed, No voice called my name, just the quiet settling of snow and the low whisper of wind against the eaves. Another knock followed, a little firmer.
I did not answer at first. I had learned caution quickly. Doors were thresholds, and thresholds mattered. I stood slowly and approached, each step deliberate. Through the narrow window in the door, I saw a figure standing on the porch. A woman, wrapped in a dark coat, her breath forming pale clouds in the air. She smiled when she saw me looking. "Merry Christmas," she said, her voice gentle, almost familiar. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." I opened the door only a few inches, enough to speak, enough to see. Cold air spilled inside, carrying the scent of snow and something else, something old, sharp, and unmistakable. "You're not," I said carefully. "Can I help you?" She glanced past me into the dim house at the single candle flickering on the table. "I thought you might be alone," she said. "No one should be alone on Christmas." Her eyes met mine then, and something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. She knew. Somehow she knew. "I won't come in," she added softly. "I just wanted to make sure you're all right." The hunger stirred, sharper now, reacting not to weakness, but to familiarity, to the echo of something I was becoming, something she already was. "I am," I said after a moment. "Truly." She studied my face, as if reading a long story written beneath the skin. "Good," she said. "Then you're doing better than most your first year." She stepped back into the snow, her form already beginning to fade into the darkness. "Remember," she said, her voice drifting back to me, "you don't have to become the worst version of yourself just because the night invites it." Then she was gone. No footprints remained. No sound followed. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart quiet and distant, steady in its strange rhythm. The candle still burned on the table, patient and unwavering. Outside, the town slept. Inside, I stood alone, holding an ornament in one hand and the weight of choice in the other. And for the first time since the night everything changed, Christmas did not feel like something I had lost. It felt like something I might learn to carry. Snow had begun to fall differently after that night. Not heavier, not faster, just closer. I noticed it when I stood by the window the next evening, watching the street lamps glow amber against the dark. Each snowflake seemed to drift with intention, as if it knew exactly where it wanted to land. When one touched the glass, a soft chill spread through the room, brushing my skin like a memory instead of cold. I realized then that my senses had changed again. I could hear the snow, not the sound of it falling, but the space it occupied. The silence between flakes felt textured, layered, almost musical. It reminded me of the old vinyl records my grandmother used to play on Christmas Eve. The pauses mattered as much as the notes. I pulled the curtains shut and turned away, unsettled by how natural this all felt. The house no longer smelled like dust and old wood. There was something richer in the air now. Pine resin, candle wax, a trace of iron beneath it all. Not unpleasant, just present, like a truth no longer hiding. I hadn't seen Elias since the night in the church. Part of me expected him to appear without warning, leaning casually against a doorway, smiling like this was all some elaborate holiday surprise. Another part of me feared he wouldn't come back at all, leaving me alone with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. That night, I dreamed without sleeping. I sat in the living room, staring at the unlit Christmas tree in the corner. I was certain I hadn't decorated it, but suddenly it was glowing softly, not with lights, but with something deeper. Each ornament reflected moments from my life: childhood laughter, awkward teenage silences, quiet dinners eaten alone. One ornament showed the church, another showed my reflection, eyes darker than before, calm in a way that frightened me. When I reached out to touch it, the dream dissolved. I was awake, and someone was standing in the kitchen. I didn't startle. I didn't reach for anything. I simply knew. "You're adjusting faster than most," Elias said gently, stepping into the doorway. He looked the same as always, timeless, unbothered by winter. "That's rare." "I didn't ask for this," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "No," he agreed, "but neither did I or anyone else who stayed." He gestured toward the chair across from me. I didn't move, but the chair slid back on its own, as if acknowledging the invitation. Elias watched me closely, his expression thoughtful. "Christmas is difficult for us," he said, "not because of the symbols, but because of what they remind us of." "Which is?" I asked. "Belonging," he said simply. He explained then, not everything, but enough.
That this change wasn't about hunger or violence or darkness. Not here, not anymore. It was about memory, about becoming something that exists between moments, watching the world move forward without fully leaving it behind. "We don't take," Elias said quietly. "We wait, we remember, and sometimes we guide." I thought of the figures in the church, the ones who watched the service from the shadows. "Is that what you were doing? Guiding?" "Witnessing," he corrected. "Christmas reminds people of who they were. It reminds us of who we no longer are." Silence settled between us, thick but not uncomfortable. Outside, the church bells rang again. Midnight.
Elias stood. "Tomorrow night is Christmas Eve," he said. "After that, things will feel clearer or harder, usually both." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You can still choose how you walk forward," he added. "That part doesn't change." When he was gone, the house felt larger, quieter. I sat alone with the tree glowing faintly in the corner, its light reflecting softly in the darkened room. For the first time since the snowfall began, I wondered, not with fear, but with calm curiosity, what Christmas would feel like now, and whether I was still waiting for it, or whether it had already arrived.
Snow fell more softly after midnight, as if the world itself had decided to whisper. I stood by the window, watching the streetlights blur behind the frost, feeling something unfamiliar settle inside my chest. Not hunger, not fear, something quieter, a weight shaped like memory. Christmas Eve had almost ended. Inside the house, everything was still. The fire had burned down to embers. The clock ticked with exaggerated patience, each second stretching longer than the last. I realized I had been standing there for a long time, listening to the silence the way one listens to a confession. That was when I heard the sound. Not outside, inside the walls. A low, steady rhythm, almost musical, like a heartbeat slowed to match the night.
I followed it down the hallway, my steps soundless on the old wooden floor. The sound grew clearer near the unused guest room, the one I hadn't opened since moving in. I didn't know why. I had simply avoided it, as if the room remembered something I didn't. The door was slightly open. Inside, moonlight spilled across the floor, revealing a small evergreen tree in the corner. I was certain it hadn't been there before. Its needles shimmered faintly, as though dusted with starlight instead of snow. Beneath it sat a single gift, wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with red string. The sound was coming from that box.
I knelt slowly, aware that this moment mattered in a way I couldn't yet name. The rhythm stopped the instant my fingers touched the string. For a moment I hesitated, then I opened it. Inside was nothing I could hold, only warmth. A memory unfolded instead, blooming quietly in my mind. A childhood Christmas, laughter at a table, a hand resting on my shoulder, the sound of my own heartbeat when it was still human, still fragile, still unaware of what the future would take. I sat there for a long time, letting the memory pass through me like light through glass. When it faded, the box was empty.
The tree was gone, and the sound did not return. I stood, feeling different. Not weaker, not stronger, but altered, as if something had loosened its grip on me. I realized then that this was not a punishment or a curse meant only to endure. It was a question, asked again and again every night. What would I choose to keep? Outside, church bells rang softly in the distance, welcoming Christmas morning. I returned to the window, watching the snow fall on a world that would never know what I was, and somehow didn't need to. For the first time since I had changed, I smiled, not at the night, but at the quiet idea that even creatures like me were allowed moments of gentleness. And as dawn began to pale the sky, I wondered, without fear, without certainty, whether this strange, endless life was meant to be survived or slowly understood.
Snow continued to fall outside the small town, soft and soundless, as if the world itself were holding its breath. By now, I had grown used to the quiet changes in my body, the way the cold no longer bothered me, the way time seemed to stretch and blur. But Christmas Eve brought something different. Not hunger, not fear, memory. I sat alone by the window, watching warm lights glow in neighboring houses. Families moved behind curtains, shadows laughing, hands passing plates,
moments stitched together by warmth I could almost remember. Almost. The scent of pine and old wood drifted faintly through a cracked window, carrying with it echoes of a life I once lived. That night, as church bells rang in the distance, I felt a pull stronger than instinct. Not toward blood, not toward darkness, but toward the past, toward the person I used to be. I followed the sound of distant carols into the woods, where snow clung to branches like frozen breath. Each step felt ceremonial, as if the forest itself were guiding me. At the heart of the trees stood an old clearing, untouched by footprints. In the center burned a single lantern, its flame steady despite the wind. I knew this place. I had stood here before, years ago, on a Christmas long forgotten, when I was still human and afraid of the dark, when I had made a choice I barely remembered making. As I reached for the lantern, the world seemed to tilt. For a moment, I saw myself reflected in the glass, not as I was now, but as I had been, warm, fragile, alive. The reflection lingered just long enough to remind me that becoming something else does not erase who you were.
The lantern flickered. The forest grew quiet again, and I realized that my first Christmas as a vampire was not about what I had lost, but about what I still carried with me into the night. The snow began to fall more steadily after that night, soft and unhurried, as if the world itself had decided to slow down. I noticed it most from the upstairs window, where I often stood without realizing how long I had been there. The glass felt cool beneath my fingertips, grounding me in a way the rest of the house no longer did.
Something inside me had shifted, not dramatically, not like the stories promised. There was no hunger, no sudden strength, no fear of mirrors or crosses. Instead, there was a quiet awareness, an understanding that time no longer pressed against me in the same way. Minutes stretched, hours softened, even memories felt less sharp, as though they had been gently sanded down. I began to notice details I had always missed. The way candlelight moved across the walls at night, never repeating the same pattern twice. The sound of the old clock in the hallway, ticking not like a countdown, but like a steady companion. The subtle warmth that lingered in rooms long after the fire had gone out, as if the house remembered being alive.
On Christmas Eve, I didn't sleep. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't feel the need to. I sat in the living room, the tree lit only by its small white lights. The ornaments reflected my image back at me in fragments, an eye here, a hand there, never quite a whole person. I found that strangely comforting. At midnight, the church bells rang in the distance. Their sound carried through the cold air, low and patient. I listened carefully, half expecting something inside me to react, but nothing did. My heart didn't race, my breath didn't catch. I simply listened, letting the sound pass through me. That was when I realized the change wasn't about becoming something else. It was about letting go.
I thought of my family, of past Christmases filled with noise and warmth and arguments that ended in laughter. Those memories didn't hurt anymore. They rested inside me like old photographs, still meaningful, but no longer demanding. I stepped outside onto the porch,
Snow crunched softly beneath my feet. The night was vast and quiet, the sky pale and endless. I felt small within it, but not alone. Whatever I had become, whatever the word vampire truly meant in this life, it wasn't a monster hiding in the dark. It was a witness. As the snow continued to fall, I understood that this was only the beginning, not of eternity, but of awareness, of nights spent listening instead of fearing, of days passing without urgency, of Christmases marked not by gifts or rituals, but by stillness. And somewhere deep inside, a question lingered, not frightening, not urgent, just gently present. If this was my first Christmas like this, what would the next one feel like?
Snow was falling more softly now, each flake drifting as if it had all the time in the world. I stood by the window of the small house, watching the quiet street glow under strands of pale Christmas lights. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang once, then fell silent again. This was my first Christmas as a vampire, and strangely, it was the first Christmas I could truly remember. The hunger was still there, like a distant echo, no longer sharp, no longer screaming. I had learned to live with it, to let it pass through me without taking control. The world no longer felt like a place I needed to conquer or escape from. It felt like something I was finally allowed to observe.
Outside, a child laughed as they chased their breath into the cold air. A door closed. Footsteps faded. Life continued, unaware of me standing just beyond its rhythm. I thought of who I had been before the night everything changed. I thought of warmth, of candlelight, of voices raised in imperfect songs. I realized that becoming something eternal had not taken those memories away. It had only made them clearer. On the table behind me sat a single unlit candle. I struck a match and watched the flame bloom, small and fragile. It reminded me that even the briefest light could push back an enormous dark. I understood then that this new existence was not a curse or a gift. It was simply another way of being awake, another way of listening. As midnight approached, the snow grew heavier, and the world felt wrapped in a hush so deep it seemed sacred. I closed my eyes and let the silence settle around me. Somewhere inside that stillness, I wondered, not with fear, but with calm, how many more Christmas nights I would stand like this, watching, remembering, choosing. The candle flickered once, and for the first time, eternity did not feel lonely at all.